Welcome to the Afterlife podcast. This is your host, Pooja Chilikuri, and I have with me today Alyssa Marley. I have gotten to know Alyssa recently because I was a guest on her show. She is passionate about interviewing people that have had all kinds of spiritual and paranormal experiences, and she is here with us today to share her journey. Thank you so much, Alyssa, and welcome to the show.
Pooja, I just love you so much. So thank you so much for having me on the show. I just feel like we're two souls that are like meant to be friends. So thank you again so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for saying that, Alyssa. I feel the
Yeah.
same way. And
Yeah.
just starting out, I would love to ask you, what got you interested in this whole paranormal, supernatural type things?
There's such a backstory with this. Like, I don't know if you've heard any of my story, like on any other like podcast, but I had a very traumatic history with like drug addiction and trauma and things like that. And while I was going through all of that, my creativity was totally shut off. And I was just living for basically like highs, like trying to like, cover pain with like something like a quick fix, whether it be from drugs or whatever mode you could use. But since I've been sober for a few years now, my creativity has just come back with like a vengeance, like in a positive way. I don't know. It's so weird. I just have this drive to learn and to create. And I've always been fascinated with near death experiences. I used to also watch a lot of like documentaries about like paranormal things. And so I think also I do really enjoy listening to podcasts quite regularly. I'd say almost daily. So I thought may as well take the passion that I have for learning these things and hearing about these things and create my own podcast, especially because with like near death studies, it's given me this like validation that we don't have to fear death. So I feel like I can pass that on to other people that maybe wouldn't necessarily hear about these types of topics and then just like sharing what I've learned, basically.
That's awesome, Alyssa. I think we share that passion in common for sure.
Yeah.
And, with all the people that you've interviewed, and you've had some fascinating guests on there with all kinds of experiences, is there any paranormal, supernatural, spiritual, near death experience, any story that stood out to you? And when you heard it, you went, wow, I didn't know that. Or, wow, that's like unbelievable.
Pretty much everything I hear is like so mind blowing, and I've heard so many, but I'm not sure. Do you know who Betty Guadagno is? She
Yes,
like
I
she goes by
interviewed
Betty
her on
Buddha.
this show.
We kind of have like also like similar backgrounds. So when I heard her story, coming from like a background of drug addiction and having her spiritually transformative experience, and coming back and just like having this zest for life, it was somebody that I could relate to. And it was also kind of fascinating because it kind of put that bug in my ear that like maybe there are things that I haven't learned yet that could be true, because she talks a lot about pre-birth planning. And I think even in her experience, she remembers like I think she basically described it like she was going through like a grocery store and like picking like all these like life experiences off the shelves that she wanted to have in her life experience. And she really talks about like how basically if you look at life through that lens, you can kind of disarm yourself from that victim mentality, because you could be like, oh, I chose to go through this experience to, I don't know, like evolve, like I went through this experience for a reason. So even though it's challenging in the moment, and of course we're going to feel human feelings where you could feel sad or overwhelmed or depressed, the fact that you could look at it from that lens, like I chose to go through this experience for a specific reason, just helps you kind of get rid of that victim mentality. So I was like, "Oh yeah, that's so true." And so I mean, I think in any sense, like I'm kind of an optimist. So I feel like you can always find the silver lining in anything, or you can use certain experiences to help other people. So that was something I really related with, because I'm like, that's what I can do. I can just like share love and put a positive spin on things.
Thank you, Alyssa. Betty's story is also one of my favorites. And I do remember her saying that the perspective that we have from the other side is so different. That's why we choose the terrible things because on that side, I guess we don't realize how terrible it's going to feel once we're inside our
Yeah.
body.
Yeah, exactly. We just have that amnesia that we forget where we came from.
Yeah.
And then we're like, "Ah, I changed my mind."
Absolutely. That also brings me to a question like, exploring these near death stories. For me, I know I hear things that I either find it not hard to believe because I trust the people that are bringing these stories, but almost fascinating to where, we're deeply conditioned to not either whether through religion or through society, that some of these things we tend not to believe or like, where's the proof? Or scientifically, how could we prove this or that? So, did you ever encounter any kind of skepticism? Like, and how do you deal with that if somebody's watching your show and they're like, well, this is hard to believe. I don't believe this. Or have you ever had that happen?
Oh, yes, I've had that happen before. Well, even specifically about, like, pre-birth planning as an example, I've had people get really upset about it because they're like, "I didn't choose this, like, why would I choose this?" So, I think that you just have to kinda let it go. Like, it's not my responsibility to change anybody's minds, and I also don't think that the truth is necessarily the same for every single person. So we can take a little bit from this and a little bit from that and just kind of take on what works for us. So I just continue to share, and my job is not to like preach like this is like the way it is 100%. I'm just giving, the lessons or things that I've learned and passing them on to the next person. And I'd say like I know tarot readers say this all the time, but like take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. But that's kind of like how I live my life, and I think it works for people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. So I have another question for you, Alyssa. Like, because I know, especially because it's true in my case. So I always want to ask this. What kind of faith did you have before you went on this podcasting journey? And then did it change because of this? Did your worldview change? Did you have a shift in perspective?
That is a great question. So, yes, I was raised Christian. Basically, we started at like I think my grandparents were Brethren Christian, so very like buttoned up and conservative. And then my mom brought us to like the Baptist church, and then we kind of veered into like the Pentecostal hands over like people praying, healing, speaking in tongues, things like that. I I think there's it just is connected with, like, some of my trauma, my past trauma. There was also religious trauma, things like my youth pastor, when I was going to high school, he basically had an affair on his wife and basically groomed one of the girls that was above me, like, 1 grade above me, and, it's just, like, obviously illegal, like, you shouldn't be doing that, but, like, just doing inappropriate things, and that was, like, from one of our leaders that we looked up to in the church, and a lot of things happened that just really broke my trust when it came to like Christianity and organized religion. So I don't know if it was specifically because of like where my like viewpoints or belief system has gone now, but that just kind of veered me in a different direction to kind of seek different perspectives and different philosophies. But it never really sat well with me. It still like bothers me to this day because like I have Christian roots, like of course, like that's my foundation. So there are constantly things that I go back and forth with, like, is this right? Is this not right? But you know how it says, like, in the Bible that, like, if you believe that God is or that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died on the cross for your sins, that you'll go to heaven. What about everybody else? That's, like, always been something that bothers me. Like, what about, like, everybody who's, like, a Sikh or a Muslim or a Jew or, like, all these different religions? So I think I've always, like, been like, "Okay, like, what can I get from this?" Like, there are certain things about Christianity that are beautiful, that, like, love one another, and we show who our creator is by loving each other, like, and that's the purpose of why we're here is just to love each other. I know I sound like a hippie, but that's just, like it's just, like, so deep rooted
It's
in me, but I think, being exposed to near death studies and the paranormal, it just makes me believe that maybe we don't have it fully right. So I'm just wanting to continue to learn.
That's a great place to be, Alyssa, because I really think that some mysteries are not to be solved. And, some things that are still uncertain and that are mystery, that's what faith is about. I don't think faith is about being 100% sure about everything.
Yeah.
That just destroys the purpose of faith, I think.
Yeah.
And thank you for saying that because I was in an evangelical church for a long time and I come from a Hindu background and I really love Jesus even to this day. But it always made me wonder, what about my family? Because I grew up Hindu. And so I really wrestled with that. And of course, with all the near death experiences and all these stories and, just the evolution of my own soul, I don't believe that Jesus is exclusive like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Honestly, the one of the biggest things that, like, I reference over and over again, I don't even remember who said it, but one of my previous guests said that when she met our creator on the other side, she's like, "What should I call you?" And he said, "It matters less what you call me, but that you call me at all." And I think, people have these different perspectives when they have their near-death experiences because of what's familiar to them. So it doesn't I think that, like, God is universal, like, and you're just gonna see what's familiar to you because, like, it will help you understand who it is that you're looking at. It doesn't like, I think that maybe everybody is a little bit right and a little bit wrong at the same time, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. It's really funny because you reminded me of someone that this is not someone I interviewed, but someone whose story I saw through IANS. That's the International Association for Near-Death Studies, for those who are watching and listening. And her name is Amy Call. And I think I came across her story. It's got to be at least 10 years. And she was met with it was either an angel or a spirit guide. And she asked him which is the right religion. I think she grew up in a Mormon church and then she was wanting to know what is the right religion. And they said to her, it's like asking what cheese is the moon made of.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Oh, wow.
So I really appreciate you bringing these conversations to light, Alyssa, because I think this can help all of us grow together
Mhm.
because some things are universal and that's where we touch each other, in a very deep way. We have more in common than not. So
Yes,
I
I
get it.
agree.
So today, how do you see your faith?
I would say that I just don't subscribe or follow any organized religion anymore, but
Mhm.
I do believe that there is God. And I do feel like I have a relationship with this entity, whoever he, she, we just said, like whoever they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like I'm being led. Like, I do feel like I receive signs or intuition or guidance. So there is a relationship of spirituality with our creator. It's just
Mhm.
not necessarily like subscribing to like fitting in a specific box, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
And I always say the box is important as long as you need it. And then when
Mhm.
you don't need it anymore, I guess that's when, the connection with spirit deepens. In my opinion, I think sometimes we need the box to, get to that point. So,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, for
And I
sure.
think that religion can be a beautiful thing when it is used correctly. I think that like my perspective is somewhat jaded just because of my past experiences, but there are so many people that have something good from it.
Mhm.
So I say go for it.
Yeah, me too. And Alyssa, that's another thing we have in common. I've been very jaded as well, but I also experienced a lot of good things. So I know it works, when
Yeah.
it's done right. And speaking of that, do you think, like, with all the spiritual explorations, hearing all these stories about paranormal, near death, angels, guides, Jesus, like all kinds of entities on the other side, and then we have, folks that are very scientifically oriented and want proof for everything. Do you think science and religion or spirituality can coexist, or do you see those lines getting blurred at all?
Well, I definitely think that they coexist. I mean, the biggest thing is like, if you, for instance, like with Christianity, like it says in the Bible that God created us in his image, right?
Mhm.
So if you do subscribe to that, like we are meant to be curious and ever evolving and look at science and expand our knowledge. Like I like that's how we were created. So I know that like some people really need that proof to believe in certain things, but I
Mhm.
think that like if once somebody is ready, they will have an open mind. Maybe if they do need that proof and they say like nothing else exists, I'm just an atheist or whatever it is, then they're just not ready to be
Mhm.
exposed to spirituality.
What are your thoughts on what spirituality is?
Like what it is, I think it's
Mm,
just I mean, there's so many degrees, right? It could just be meditation, it could be Reiki, it could be tarot. It just depends, but I think it's just having an open mind to
mhm,
some kind of draw from your soul, if that makes
mhm.
sense. Like,
Yes, yes, it
I think
does.
that's another thing that we're created to be, is like a being that is constantly like searching for something. And a lot of people talk about like having like a hole in their heart, or like a
Mm,
void, and that they're
mhm,
trying to fill it. They're trying to fill it. Sometimes
mhm.
it needs to be filled with spirituality. So we sometimes you don't even know what it is you're trying to fill that void with, but it could be spirituality, or a hobby, or all these things. But I think we're very complex creatures.
Think we are. And I've even joked about it because I read somewhere that a scientist looking under a microscope, if they get in a trance doing that, that's they're being
That could
spiritual.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in that moment. Yes.
Well, because
So,
you also have to think, like, where does this come from? Like, or
yeah.
how did this get here? Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question. And this has no right or wrong answer because I ask this every time I get a chance. Why do you think we're here?
Yeah, that's like the age-old question, right? Like, what is the purpose of life? I think that from what I've started gathering from these near-death experiences is we are here to evolve, and we are
Mhm,
here to have this life experience. And I
mhm,
think that we are not aware of all the things that are out there. I mean, think about it even now in the news with all these like UAPs and UFOs. We don't know what all is out there. So I think it's just about experiencing things, learning things. And then I feel like on the other side, we are all a collective. So
mhm,
all this knowledge goes back up to the collective. And then we can
mhm.
choose to have another life experience, whether it's here or on another planet or in another dimension. Like, I think the possibilities are endless, and we're not even touching the tip of the iceberg right now.
Yeah, and I learn something new every time, and this is something I hadn't heard before, Alyssa. So thank you. Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. So, do you have any advice for those that are curious about exploring the spirit realm, or they're deconstructing from their faith and they're exploring, or just someone that's going through a transition where the old beliefs are not serving them and they're restless and they're seeking?
I think, we are in a society are so private. So I think finding people that you trust to talk
Mm,
things through is really important. I also am very honest about how I'm constantly going to therapy. And if you can afford it, if you can do it, therapy is really good. But also exposing yourself to things that maybe push you outside of your comfort zone. So listening to podcasts where there are people who have had near death
mm,
experiences, just to learn other perspectives, and then again, take what resonates with you and then just leave behind what doesn't.
Yep. I always say that. That's
Yeah.
very important because we're all in a different place in our journey. And
Mm.
so, how can people connect with you and where can we find you and your work, Alyssa? What's the best way?
Yeah, so I am all over the place. I have Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Most of my handles are Something Paranormal Podcast. I believe Instagram is Something Paranormal Podcast. You can also send me an email, somethingparanormalpodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send me an email if you're just interested in chatting. I also have, the podcast Something Paranormal. So if you want to be a guest on the show, feel free to reach out.
Yes, absolutely. And I will make sure to include all of those links in the show notes as well, Alyssa.
Okay,
Thank
thank you so
you.
much.
Thank you for your time and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.